live on Facebook, and Mark will introduce. So almost there.
I think we're good, right?
All right, we're ready to go.
Rock and roll. So, well, welcome everybody to this amazing Lit Balm dedicated to the life and work of Peter Michelson, with grateful thanks to Michael Anania, and hopefully with appearances from John Matthias. I know Judith is in the room, Jennifer, Lewis, Simone, Matthew, Cooperman, Susan, Dingle, and Mark Spitzer. But before we get to that, I'm going to introduce my co-host, Cassandra Atherton, who's an award-winning writer, scholar of prose poetry, and professor of writing and literature in Melbourne, Australia. Her most recent books of prose poetry are Pre-Raphaelite, Leftovers, and Fugitive Letters. She is currently writing a book of prose poetry on the atomic bomb with funding from the Australia Council. Cassandra co-wrote prose poetry and introduction from Princeton New Press and the Anthology of Australian Prose Poetry. Cassandra's commissioning editor for the fabulous Westerly magazine in Australia. What you got for us, Cassandra?
I have a series of poems that we've been asked to write or commissioned to write that start with "it must be" and then a year, and then sort of discussing the year. So all prose poets around this project in Australia. So this is called "It Must Be 1995." It must be 1995 because you're talking about American baseball and writing me letters on soft tissue blue paper. I open the envelopes by running a butter knife around the perimeter, imagining your tongue activating the sticky gum adhesive. Your loopy cursive handwriting lines my handbag, and when it rains, the ink stains the satin interior with desire. I knock on your door on Wednesday mornings, and your kisses are electric on my skin. When I quote from Medea and Beloved, you trace my lips with your index finger, and as I talk of the uncanny, you haunt the nape of my neck with your hot breath. In December, you take me to Boston, and I run down Marlborough Street in the snow. On our fold-down bed in a familiar brownstone, you press your body into mine, and the ice crystals in my hair turn to water on your pillow. So good old 1995. I am going to introduce the incredible Mark Vincenz, who is an Anglo-Swiss American poet, a fiction writer, translator, editor, publisher, designer, multi-genre artist, and musician. He has published over 20 books of poetry, including more recently Einstein Fledermaus, The Little Book of Earthly Delights, A Brief Conversation with Consciousness, There Might Be a Moon or a Dog from Gazebo Books in Australia, 39 Wonders and Other Management Issues, just released from Spite and Dival, and The Pearl Diver of Irun Mani, forthcoming early 2023 from White Pine Press. If that isn't enough, an album of music, ambience, and verse, Left Hand Clapping, is forthcoming from Tree Torn Records. Vincenz is also a prolific translator, and I know you know the answer to this. What is he translated from? German, Romanian, and French. He has published 11 books of translations, most recently an Audible Blue Selected Poems 1963 to 2016 by award-winning Swiss poet and novelist Klaus Metz, just out from White Pine Press. He's currently working on a stellar novel entitled The Age of Occasions. Vincenz is editor and publisher of Mad Hat Press and publisher of New American Writing. He has lived all over the world. It's our favorite bit, everyone, from Brazil to China to Iceland to India. He was born in Matilda Hospital on the Peak in Hong Kong, but now lives on a farm in rural Western Massachusetts overlooking Herman Melville's Greylock Mountain, Melville's inspiration for Moby Dick, where there are more, are you waiting for it? Eastern hog-nosed snakes, northern copperheads, and red-spotted newts than people. I love a bit of a newt, Mark.
Well, I have a newt, yeah. This poem is called In Praise Of. In praise of mute expressions, that which is beyond the waters, in the fluttering of a million wide-eyed eyelashes, or the eye in its square dance with the sun. In praise of the unapprehended, the wide-eyed, they who were once here, the upended, the confused, and they who can become a parish, they who fish for minnows, those who watched with eyes smaller than yours, in praise of memory, of the heart's small flask, in praise of disturbances, in praise of the tiniest things, the walrus's whispers, the sea slug's slow sliver, the effluence of the Po River, all that Etruscan wine lost at the bottom of the Mediterranean, and a little tinkling of iron out in the biting darkness. Thank you. I'm now delighted to introduce to you. Everyone's saying that my mic is too low. I've adjusted it as high as it can go. I don't know what's up. I haven't changed any settings or anything like that. So it'll have to do, I'm afraid. Can you hear me well enough though?
Yeah, I think if you lean in, it's slightly better.
It's so strange. Okay. Let's see. So we are delighted to celebrate Peter Michelson. Peter Michelson, his personae were poet, essayist, teacher, and critic. In those capacities, his work appeared in many political and literary journals and anthologies, including an America's Anthology, The Art of Friction, Chicago Review, Exquisite Corpse, The Nation, The New Republic, Notre Dame Review, Tri-Quarterly, and others. Peter published 7 books, 4 volumes of poetry, including The Eater, Pacific Plain Song, 1 through 13, When the Revolution Really, and Mixed Frequencies, New and Selected Poems, which came out from Mad Hat Press in 2020. And also 2 of critical prose, The Aesthetics of Pornography, Speaking the Unthinkable, and a critical edition, The Extant Poetry and Prose of Max Michelson. Peter edited the Chicago Review, and he co-edited Rolling Stock with Ed and Jenny Dorn, and was a contributing editor to Tri-Quarterly and another Chicago magazine. And Michael, who's going to lead us through the feature here today, Michael Anania is a poet, essayist, and fiction writer. His published work include 13 collections of poetry, among them Selected Poems, Natural Light, Heat Lines, and the latest, Night Songs and Clamors. His work is widely anthologized and has been translated into Italian, German, French, Spanish, and Czech. He's also published a novel, The Red Menace, and a collection of essays, In Plain Sight. He received many awards, and he was poetry editor of Audit, and founder and co-editor of Audit Poetry, and literary editor of The Swallow Press, and poetry editor of Partisan Review, contributing editor to Tri-Quarterly, and has been serving as advisor editor to many other magazines and presses. He's professor emeritus of English at the University of Illinois at Chicago. So, Michael, I'm going to hand you over the reins now.
Hang on, Michael, you're on mute. I'm asking you to unmute.
There we go.
Hey.
Anyway, thank you. Thank you, Mark. This is the book we're celebrating, Mixed Frequencies, Selected Poems of Peter Michelson. And I'm going to say a few personal things by way of introduction. I met Peter in 1967 through our mutual friend, Eugene Wildman. It was through Peter that I met John Matthias. And the group of us, including Charles Newman, created a kind of magical literary circle in and around Chicago, through the mid-70s. A lot of interesting things going on. And with those 3 literary disruptors, Wildman, who wrote incredibly strange fictions, a book I published called Montezuma's Ball, and the great collection of Experiments in Prose. And then, and John, who his book Bucyrus was an interesting revelation for me, and I think the whole poetry world, in terms of understanding the politics of language. And then Peter's The Eater, and his astonishing book was in 3 separate editions, The Aesthetics of Pornography. It was an extraordinary time. Anyway, I published Peter's first book called The Eater, and it included this incredible kind of take on 19th century book selling. If you look at the old books, there'll be an advertisement for the book on the frontispiece page. This is Peter's advertisement for The Eater. Reader, my guess is you needs a wedding to your tastes, not to mention a wondering to your pander. You're standing by poem shelf in one, no more than 2 of the 20 bookstores that sells poems across this great land. Reader, I want it understood here and now that rumors about my competitors notwithstanding, those nameless and incompetent assholes, I like, nay, love my country. I have never gone back where I came from, much to my poor, overburdened mother's relief. Even though the army scorned me, never burned my draft card. And twice when I was in trouble, I called the cops rather than a hippie. Though I did once ask for a match, which he did not have, showing what you'd expect from them. And you wonders, should you buy a book by Gary Snyder or Don Lee or Lawrence Ferlinghetti? Don't do it, reader. They're freaks. To a man, they love other things more than their country, more than their mother, and don't buy that book of immortal poems of the English language. It is filled with beauty, reader, that opiate of the rich. Buy this book you are holding in your hands. Patronize us, reader. We are a small and dwindling group who love our mothers, who love our country, who despise drugs, who don't, like decent Salamis, want things handed to us on a platter. Don't drive us into fakery, into freakery, reader. Buy this book. Anyway, it goes on. It's absolutely quite wonderful. Reader, reader, it says at the end. What more can I say? What more? Please, please, reader, buy American. Anyway, wonderful. Is Judith with us? Judith Aplon, did she make it?
Yes, I'm sort of with you. I'm still trying to arrange myself.
Oh, you
But
look
can you hear
fine.
me?
You look fine to me.
Well, there's only
I
half
want to
of my
introduce
head.
Judith Aplon, who is a longtime teacher of intellectually and educationally troubled children, and Peter's companion for years and years. If you read the wonderful series of traveling poems, Judith is the other half of the we in Scandinavia and in Sri Lanka and in China. So if you could read something, Judith, it'd be wonderful.
I think I'm too low. Shall I get a pillow?
Oh,
To sit
oh,
on?
you look fine.
Can you see me?
I can see your glasses. The trouble is the rest of us. Let me see. There you are. There you are.
Right. Yeah. Let me get another pillow.
Okay.
I'm very inexperienced at this, so inexperienced that this is my first foray into the world of Zoom. So please bear with me. I'm going to read the first section of The Priestess of the Dreams. Number 1, she dreams. The lucid light is gray. Pennants flutter all the way from where we were to where we started when the sun was angled right. She dreams her way back home again. He tends the time, the byways underground to the end of days. The priestess dreams. She marks the way to the yonder string band rendezvous where the green girl climbs the ivied wall. And mothers dance, their babies bobbling on their bellies. Hold your head on straight, she says. The green girls climb. They keep the time on toy guitars. The priestess dreams. The yonder string band claps. All the babies clap their hands. Are these the things that we'll remember when all the catastrophic klezmer stops? Where are the things that in the sentience of the night the priestess dreams? The breeze wafts through madrona trees, their leaves crackling by the sea. The tides relentlessly are lapping. Remember? At the shore, 500,000 heartbeats race. The priestess dreams of what we want to know. The pace of things, the absent angle of the sun, the aurora's arc, the lucid bright gray light. There in the park are all the things we need. Recall the priestess tending time, babies bobbling on maternal bellies, the lurid smile at the day of ends, the end of days. The green girl climbs, her shoes and dress are green, so green they fluff the elegies of night. Where are the things we will remember? They're in the park, they're in the tides, they're in the angle of the sun. The yonder string band claps, clap. All the babies clap their hands. The priestess dreams the lucid light. Her dreams anticipate the counterpoints of sight, all the way from where we stand to all the dissonance of night.
Beautiful. That's just beautiful.
Thank you. It's the poem.
I'm glad to finally meet the priestess.
Ah,
Anyway, now I want to introduce John Matthias. This is going to be wildly complex because John was unable to get onto Zoom electronically. So he's now on my phone and he can make a few remarks and I hope read a poem via my phone held up to my iPad. And let's hope it doesn't cause some sort of shift in the planetary plates. So here is John Matthias.
Can I be heard at all?
Well, speak loudly.
Can I be heard at all? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
We can hear you a little bit. Can you put it on speakerphone?
Good thinking. There we.
What was that?
It works. Go ahead, John.
It worked. Okay. Well, I'm terribly sorry I couldn't get connected. My Zoom was out of date, and I couldn't remember my Apple ID. And presumably it's possible to get Zoom back, but not in 10 minutes. I'm going to read a dedication that Peter wrote in Michael's anthology of new poetry, which was the first printing of a sequence of Peter's best-known poem, the sequence Pacific Plain Song. It says, with thanks down deep for suffering through these in the making with me, in the beginning a word, a beginning in the word for us both. Now, what he's talking about there is that he began working on the body of Pacific Plain Song, which is a book-length poem ultimately. At about the same time, I began working on my first long poem called Poem in Three Parts, which was also published by Michael in the Swallow Press series of books in the volume called Bucyrus. And we were living very close to each other, not quite within walking distance, but he was the first interesting person that I met at Notre Dame and became, of course, one of the most interesting people I've ever known in my life. We were both trying to do something new in these long poems, and that, to rather simplify things, was to move from what was primarily a lyric impulse, the impulse of the short lyric, which both of us had written almost exclusively up to that point, to something that was more discursive and exploratory. and the lyric would from time to time emerge. And certainly in terms of sound, there was no diminishment in these long poems, but they were experimental in the very literal sense that we didn't know very much what we were doing when we got started. And together, as Peter says in his note to me, we suffered through this, trying to figure out how on earth one wrote a long poem, and a long poem, in fact, not sounding too much like other long poems that had been written or were being written, and that were becoming famous at this time, those especially by Charles Olson and Robert Duncan. So that's where we both were at the time that Peter began to publish his Pacific Plain songs. And my feeling is, I can't verify this, and I've tried by looking around in old magazines. My feeling is that the first Pacific Plain song he wrote and published was Plain Song at Lappish. And I think that, although it appears third in all printings of Pacific Plain Song, I think that because it is pretty purely lyric. It's also much shorter than the other Plain songs, which become narrative and discursive. And when I said that both of us were verging away from the pure lyric to the discursive, I should have called that narrative-discursive or discursive-narrative. But that's not what this is. And I think with this song, he makes the leap from his earlier lyrics that appear in The Eater to the expanded forms that begin to emerge in Pacific Plain Song. Now, Lappish, he seems to be visiting more or less as a tourist, and his persona in these poems varies from one guise to another, and very seldom is he simply a tourist or a visitor looking on in a rather objective way. But here he is doing just that. I've not been to Lappish, but I'm told by the encyclopedia that it was a corruption of the French for the mouth, la bouche, and there is a mouth of a large river there where the local tribe launched its fishing boats, both small and large, very small in some cases, two-man canoes, and extremely large, intended to carry large catches of fish for some considerable distance. So this is the poem, and I would say that it mediates between the dominantly lyrical poems of Peter's early writing and the discursive narrative poems that are characteristic and more characteristic as the poems develop in Pacific Plain Song. This is Plain Song at Lappish. Locked in this neither past nor present anachronistic village is shrouded in its battered sea spray air, its shoreline stacked with stony, bleached, enormous, 2 feet thicker than a man is tall, carcasses of trees, their jagged roots upended. Dawn, the sullen sky, all is shroud and bone white gleaming along this brittle shore. well past bearing squaw rocks, amid the baskets she no longer weaves, and looks beyond the mist-bound shore, complaining men no longer ride the open boats or risk rough water out at sea. In the village, white Mark Wesby teaches Indians one or two their ancient craft of carving. Offshore, shell oil blasts Leviathan and salmon, sounding lively messages of profit through this bowl of spray. But I came to see fishers at their trade and their past a curio, their present obsolete. I watch the ghosts of Kawikuit, oil-skinned and glistening, astride the pitch and swell they work their dark Pacific Sea and bend to haul up gleaming nets to bring rich flesh of fish to air. Their calloused fingers slap the gaff deep in the heaving gills they snare. Implacably they gaff that signal, writhing, gaff and know an old despair.
Wonderful.
So I think that's the very first Pacific Plain song. And I think it was published in Missouri Review or Tri-Quarterly, but I'm not sure which one.
Well, look, thank you, John. I was going to introduce John, but I got so involved in the technological mess that I didn't. But I now can say that John Matthias needs no introduction. Major American poet. Recent books, just quickly: Acoustic Shadows, Living with a Visionary, Some Words of Those Wars, and a lovely book of photographs with his daughter Laura called Sightlines. Next, I hope, Mark Spitzer, are you there? I'm going to just quickly, Mark Spitzer is a poet, translator, editor, and a pretty well-noted environmentalist. His books of poetry include my favorite, Glurk, an epic poem about a salamander, and his work on fish of one kind or another, the rescue of North American ugly or a frightening fish is quite wonderful. He also was the founding editor of Toad Suck Review and edited The Best of Sucks, which is an anthology just recently published by Mad Hat. Mark Spitzer.
Thank you, Michael. You guys can hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, all right. So if Peter knew that I would be reading at a retrospective about his life and work, he wouldn't just roll over in his grave. He would robustly proclaim, "Oh no, not that guy." Seriously, my relationship with Peter was mostly that of a grad student back in the 90s, early 90s at University of Colorado. My relationship with him was mostly that of a grad student who partied down with professors, which is what my relationship was with half of my professors at CU. But with Peter, he often liked to proudly proclaim that I was an annoyance. Once at a party at Lorna D. Cervantes' house, the subject came up of me paddling a canoe to Iowa City, and Peter responded, "Spitzer, you asshole, you can't get to Iowa City on a canoe, sorry." This expression became infamous and pretty much became a refrain from my colleagues for a couple of years at CU. But Peter only pretended to hate me. He was really quite compassionate and connectable, which is why everybody loved him. I once met him in front of the student center at the university, and he asked how I was doing. I told him that I'd been awake for 3 days, and his tone became really concerned. "Why? What's wrong?" he asked. And really nothing was wrong. I was just totally into a writing project, and I was adrenalized, and I was pounding out a poem. And So I was all fired up on that, but I was really surprised about his concern for his students. Well, that experience reminds me of how after a year of Ed Dorn being chair of the department, creative writing at CSU, Dorn spent $17,000, our entire budget, on booze, which that benefited probably me more than anybody else in the department. Peter became our chair after that. And as chair, part of his duties was to observe the graduate assistants who were teaching Intro to Creative Writing. And he did that in one of my classes. He observed me, and then he took me out for lunch. I didn't expect it. And he spent an hour really mentoring me on what I could do better and how to do it. I can't really remember the details exactly that he told me, but I was impressed that he gave a damn about me. So he gave a damn about somebody who he publicly pretended to be disgruntled by. And in my 20 years of mentoring grad students, I've never taken the time to observe students and pass my expertise on like that. So I'm really extremely grateful for what Peter gave to me as a student that he proclaimed to hate, basically. But back to the idea of chair, which Peter was for the last year I was there, and I never was, but many of you have been. And all of us know the double-edged sword of being a chair. I was really amazed with his poem on this subject, in which he plays with the multiple meanings of this word. And when Peter plays with poetry, that's when he's at his best. I just really love an association with this word that he finally arrives at in the poem, which I never considered until I read this poem. I won't give the context of this association of chair away. Yes, I will. He brilliantly connects the idea of being a chair with the electric chair. So here's the poem. The chair is genderless, generous, we hope, and sui generis, definitive and ruling now and then unruly factions. It's by and large a good position with provisos, one when in churlish times it switches from the catbird to the hot seat, and one when in parlous times its disposition smacks of Nazis. Notes the bard on easy rests, the seat that sits the throne, not least because, though gilded, grand and gorgeously embellished, its bottom line is often architecturally severe. Still, cushy, carved, or careless of anatomy, from recorded time we know, it's always been the sign and sentience of authority. That apt coinage, the seat of power, certainly requires the chair to sit it in. And where it sits, we stand before, or in extremis, kneel in fealty, proposal, and other servitudes. That's how it's always been. But as we know, authority rhymes with criminality, and we're Americans. When the couplet gets more cozy than our tolerance, our constitutional conventions now suppose a tolerance for extreme function. We rightly call it capital and wish it weren't so rare. Nonetheless, we're proud. We're free to sit selective culprits in the chair. Thanks.
Terrific. Now, Simone Muench, I hope she's still here.
I'm here.
Oh, there you are. Oh, okay. A word about Simone Muench. She's poet, editor, essayist, and I suppose best characterize a lot of her work as being a literary activist. That is, she's a community builder, both sort of in her community and nationally, with her work as a collaborator and her support because of the anthology she did called They Said, of collaborative writing in more than one genre. Like Mark, she was a student of Peter's. Simone Muench.
Hi, everyone. Like Mark and Matthew Cooperman, we were all in the program around the same time. And I always just really respected Michael because the odd thing about him was that he was this huge bear of a man with this low booming voice, and yet he created such a comfortable space for us as writers. Today we'd call it a safe space, right? Where he really pressed upon us to be weird and to take risk in our writing. And I genuinely felt with him that he truly was interested and invested in his students. And I try to follow his lead in my own teaching. He had an incredible impact on me as a literary citizen. And I am so grateful to him for that. In terms of his work, I love the way he spins language, teasing it out into so many layers and meanings. But I'm going to read a pantoum, which seems odd for Peter in some ways, but I love its sonic laddering. And I also just love, I mean, obviously Peter's brilliant, but he's so playful. And so this is called In Sad and Desperate Times for F and M. And the chiaroscuro of these times, the sad and desperate times, wherein we seek felicities beyond the hope we prime, we choose when choose we can the light. Fantastic, these sad and desperate times, and so we seek nearby or far a tiny wild park and choose when choose we can to write fantastic peons to harmonize the light and dark. Nearby or far, a tiny wild park informs the fecund wind with counterpoint, a peon to harmonize the light and dark. The lucid cadence rises to anoint the fecund wind informed with counterpoint. At summer's end, the mountain flora chants a lucid cadence, rising to anoint the twining grasses. Summer blossoms dance at summer's end. The mountain flora chants their blossoms to the waning season's light. Amid the twining grasses, blossoms dance, and we are blessed who stand to face the sight. Such blossoms bring in that waning light felicities bequeathed by love's bright prime, and we are blessed who stand to face the sight, that keen chiaroscuro of our time.
Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. Oh, well, that's good. And it's wonderful to hear about Peter as a teacher. I'll add one quick anecdote. When I was doing the anthology in 1969, I called Peter up because I had a question about the text. And his daughter, Hillary, answered the phone and said, "My daddy can't come to the phone right now. He's having a news conference." And it turned out that was the week after the great Notre Dame Pornography Festival, which Peter and John helped organize. Who would have guessed there'd be problems at Notre Dame with the Pornography Festival, which ended up with a police riot somehow combined with a snowball fight, and ended, in a wild series of circumstances. If you're interested, Peter wrote a piece about it in the Notre Dame Review a few years ago. And if you really like to look at it, you can look up student accounts and reminiscences in the Notre Dame magazine. Anyway, I want to introduce now Matthew Cooperman, another poet and editor. His recent work includes Spool, Imago for the Fallen World, and a book called Still. He's collaborated with his wife, Amy Copang, with a book called Nos, N-O-S, Disorder Not Otherwise Specified, and I've heard them read from that. It's quite astonishing. Anyway, Matthew was yet another student of Peter's. Matthew.
Thank you, Michael. And I want to say thank you to Mark Vincenz as well, who right after Peter died, offered at sort of the last minute to host a celebration of his work. And it was a little scattered at that time. I'm really delighted that we've had a more measured kind of moment for this. So thank you to Mark and thank you, Michael, for putting this together. I also was, as Simone mentioned, at CU with Mark and Dave Gessner, who I see there as well. And we had, I think, a rather extraordinary moment, what I think of as perhaps the last sort of great gasp of creativity in that CU program with that amazing kind of grouping of people. And I'll always be really grateful for that. I met Peter first actually in 1984 when I did my junior year of college at CU. Though it would probably be more accurate to say that I was startled by Peter as he launched a Pall Mall in a beautiful arc over my head as I was walking to Sidney Goldfarb's workshop. And a startled yelp kind of went out and he said, "Hey, look out." And that was my first encounter with him. I went back 5 years later to study with him and with all the wonderful people there. And Peter's generosity was just extraordinary. And he taught me, I think, as much as anything, to trust talking my way into believing things. He was so good at, in a classroom, somebody would say something sort of outrageous or even untoward, and Peter would say, "What do you mean by that? Keep talking, keep talking." And then he'd kind of give you permission to talk your way into some understanding you didn't have. And I've always used that approach in my own classes, and I think it's a kind of permission that he just modeled generally. I'm going to read from the Sri Lanka poems. I'm going to read "We Love Americans," and the Sri Lanka poems are particularly dear to me because I spent 3 months in Sri Lanka in college and made a deep connection to the place and to my Buddhist studies, etc. So when Peter and Marilyn went there and we're doing really frontline work in terms of working with the Tamil Tigers and trying, the Sri Lanka was in a 10-year civil war at that point. And they were really sort of in the mix there. And the poem "We Love Americans," I think, is wonderful because it also offers Peter's humor, his extraordinary humor and wry cleverness. And also, I think, as Michael points out in his wonderful introduction, Peter's fine ear and sense of stanza and line are really there. The qualities of mind that are also that rhetorical flourish that he had so well. And I will say also that I talked with Peter probably 2 months before he passed, when he had just gotten his first copy of Mixed Frequencies, and he was delighted by the cover in particular. He said, "How do they find that Black Crow mudra?" Which I think is a wonderful way of talking about that. All right. We like Americans. Just as we navigate past a cow taking a dump on the sidewalk, a corporal in the tactical police force of Sri Lanka stops us in our tracks. Where are we going? What are we doing? Where are we from? His face is sober. The English takes some concentration. An Uzi dangles from his finger, hooked through the trigger guard. "Good evening," he says then, in Congress. "Good evening," I reply, to the Uzi. "We like Americans," he says, looking toward his captain 30 feet away. "That's my captain," he says. "Ah, good," I say, to the Uzi. "What is our business? Where do we stay?" My one eye's on the Uzi. The other calculates reply. He says he wants to pay a call. "Will that be business?" I inquire. He doesn't understand, repeats. "A week from Wednesday might be good," I say. "Will that include your friend?" I eye the Uzi. He, his captain, the red beret. I say, "We'll just be on our way." He nods. His captain, who wears a sidearm, reaches out. I freeze mid-stride. His gun hand pats my belly, round as Buddha's own. "If you see the Buddha on the road, kill him. Does that old koan apply? I hold my breath, the captain grins, I breathe deep, and we pass by. And there's Peter with his Buddha belly, ever generous, ever larger than life.
Hey, Michael, you're on mute. I've just sent you an unmute.
Peter was large. I mean, really quite large. He was a lineman, varsity football lineman in high school and college, and was picked in the draft by the New York Giants. So the choice for Peter was academe or the NFL. It was remarkable. But he was always astonishing in any space because he was so large and because his gestures were even larger and his laugh was unbelievable. And Peter, and everybody's touched on Peter's sense of humor, and he could take a kernel of language or just a passing remark and fold it in and over itself into some wonderful kind of origami of a joke that would float around the room for hours. And he would laugh each time it came by, and with this huge laugh that would shake the house. And I once accused him of turning the trees in his direction because the laugh was so monumental. Anyway, we have time left. Was Gessner there? I thought you said, is David, are you there?
He's
Yes,
there.
I am.
Yep, here he is.
I was actually just looking for a caricature I had of Peter when you were talking about that. I've got my art stuff over there and I've got him in profile, and I forgot about that. And it was right after the pornography scandal. And it captured the belly that Matt was mentioning and the beard. And so I'm going to unvideo myself and keep looking for it, because I think it picture, words, that whole thing. So
Great. I think, Mark, we have time for another round of poems. If anybody would like to take a second poem, feel free.
I was going to read one of Peter's poems.
Oh, good, good. Your microphone seems to be muted, Mark.
Is it? Can you hear me?
Well, it's just not very loud. Oh, okay, it's all right.
It's better, as Cassandra said, when you lean in, we can hear you more clearly.
It's very strange because I just actually switched to an external mic, so I was hoping that might help. Not really.
It's about the same. It hasn't really improved.
Go ahead.
All right, well, I'll lean in. This is a poem from When the Revolution Really, which is about his experiences in Asia. This one, particularly in China. En route to the misty peaks of old people. Dorn. Our train's been sidetracked somewhere between Chongqing and Chengdu. No water in the cars. At the station hose, I join the queue. 100 villages, as if by immaculate conception, appear. A, P, B, A, P, B. Foreigner abuluting at the village station. I wash my face and hands. Performance no better than routine. I smile, then grin. What's that they say? He's got a hairy belly. Is his navel filled with mold? I brush my teeth. They zero in. He's got incisors. See, I told you. Molars made of polished gold. Toothpaste foaming at my lips. Oh, Mao, Confucius, and Lipo. It's China's civic virtues month. And I don't know the protocol. Those infamous 3Ds, dirtiness, disorder, and discourtesy. Am I about to commit all three? To spoil the 5 graces and become beauties? Defile civility? Indicate the absence of a noble heart? No circumstance sharper than a pastor's fart, with 5 score of the Chinese body politic attending every move. Should I expectorate or no? Then egalitarian and fraternal, in the ties behind our cars. They saw a sign, a steaming mound of shit. Oh, what the hell I spit. The gallery breathes its O's and R's, distinctly granting approbation, if not outright applause. The engine gives a lurch. The conductor hollows, woman, go back. Woman, go back, let's go. With a bow and grin, I board. The Chongqing, then the Yangtze, downriver to the misty peaks, enshrouded in the opalescent verses of Li Po. Was that relatively well audible, or?
Yeah, I was audible. Yeah.
Yeah.
I got to figure this out. It's very strange. Ever since I did that China conference, everything's gone wonky.
Oh, it's a Chinese intervention in our lives that happens all the time. Nothing we can do about it. I'm gonna, because there have been mentions about Peter's sense of technique and the incredible way he has of playing with language. I'm gonna read this little poem for his two daughters called Midwinter Observance. This is the day of the saint, and yet before the saint, girls lit great fires. They leapt unburnt into their lovers' arms, redeeming with such leaps our souls from greater fires. The green world too thereby would strive, and grains grow richly golden. Come pears and cherries and all sweet fruits, a blessing on these fecund boughs, a flowering in their sacred roots. Come pears and cherries and all sweet fruits. So sang the ancient folk and feasted by their fires. Ah, yes, their gifted lovers gave the gift they got, and all the world was quickened. And still when lovers leap the fires they kindle, we gather in the circle of their blessed light and heat. And in that bright incontinence, our ancient amnesties complete. It's astonishing how much of that sort of 16th, early 17th century lyric that Peter was so fond of finds its way in and out of the poem. Sometimes in a situation like that, it takes a large presence in the poem. Otherwise, occasionally you'll be in a poem that seems to be moving in a projectivist way, and then suddenly you'll find yourself in that kind of Renaissance syntax and rhyme. Anyway, I know Simone had a second poem, didn't you?
Yes. I will read. This one is in couplets, and I also love Peter's unfurlings. I mean, we've talked about his line breaks. This is called Betty Grable, Digest the Lance of Rita's Dove, for KB. Finally, it was an elegance beyond her years, arresting, as she later thought, the moment of her image so adroitly pinned upon the cortex of the time's precarious imperative. Or perhaps it was the murmur of its decay, quiescent as mortality, picking pockets beneath the aegis of the equinox. 7 incisive epithets teased the modulations of her memory, though they faltered on the fulcrum of her tongue. The whirl of her bejeweled digits gestured 4 degrees northeast, Orion's celestial belt, and eloquence again beyond her years. Her recall then was all she might have wished had wishing been her deviance. No, not then or ever. It was the pen as stainless as the true Madonna's honor. Amongst so much, she'd had to swallow that. The question burned like Beetlejuice. Would she ever feel its prick again?
Wonderful. Judith, do you have another? Oh, she maybe left us. Mark, how about you, Spitzer?
I do. Well, I have one.
Okay.
from a few of his new poems. This one's called the New Year Skywatch. This earth, our oasis amid the galaxy, there the lucent primordial bask in ultraviolet shards of failing light. Like us, energies are latent, awaiting, say astronomers, sensibility, sensible as an Indonesian thunderhead floods an El Sonora wash. This northern spiral turns against the clock. The cycle inside accelerates, the gale force and more and forms the central eye. Now the energy is beyond compare. It renders even ultimate arsenals obsolete. Prodigious charges poised, enough to heave 10 million tons of water into the air. Instantaneous evaporation. However much we search, we find no match. Its latency, conversion to sensibility. We're at the center. What is it that we watch?
Great. And Matt, you had a second?
Yeah, this is Mixed Frequencies in the Golden West, and sort of the pendant poem to The Chair. And obviously where the title of the whole collection comes from. And I think this also offers Peter's delicate, elegant ear, all the internal rhyme and the almost blank verse quality of it. Mixed Frequencies in the Golden West. He lifts the chair above his head. The sun sets red in the golden west. Brilliant planes of evening glare from the crystal edge, and we are in the poise of moves as yet unmade. Questions rise like reasonable chairs and hover with the menace in his eyes. The red end of the spectrum burns. Things stretch farther than the eye can see. What's the premise of the receding light? Later on, in fact, the barman, sobbing, beat back the waves, sobbed and beat them back with all his might. Though poets wonder if they wake or dream, these are devices that convert mixed frequencies to one incisive beam. Some say oniric terrors purge us. Some prefer a fight. The chair is incisively above us. The agonist holds tight.
Wonderful. Anyone else? Well, it's been a joy. And I hope that any of you who haven't met with Peter Michelson's work will be urged to do so out of this, the book called Mixed Frequencies. Beautiful cover.
Hey, Michael,
Yeah.
I can't find the poem, but I'll tell the story of the poem.
All right. Here's Matthias back on the phone.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, everybody can hear you.
Okay. I can't find the poem, but it's one of the Chinese poems. And all of our early acquaintance, I kept urging Peter finally to go abroad. He seemed somebody who was determined to stick in America permanently and not travel except from job to job, from west to Midwest to back to the West. And when he went to China, I was absolutely astonished. The idea of Peter in China seemed utterly incongruous. And it proved to be to Peter himself in many different ways and at different points in his checkered career there. But the poem I'm thinking about has him on a train, and Peter has picked up a certain amount of Chinese, and his daughter has been teasing him about getting the tones wrong in the Chinese. You can get the word right and the accent right and the tone wrong. And of course, the word means something entirely different from what you intended it to mean. And Peter is riding on the train, and the Chinese gentleman sitting across from him says to Peter, "You speak very good Chinese." And Peter says, "You need a wash." This cracks up the entire railroad car. And Peter then attempts to say he would like to accept the invitation to take the full seat across the aisle from him. And by some strange convolution, he ends up saying, "I want to sleep with Lin Piao." Lin Piao being the Chinese defense minister at the time. And the poem, which is a prose poem, moves marvelously from one misconstruction to another misconstruction to another until he finally ends up in the sleeper, which was the Lin Piao, which he had his eye on from the beginning. Thanks to all of you for reading those poems. It's wonderful to hear Peter read aloud again. Most of you know there is a CD available with some music on it, and we all ought to try to get this book around a bit, since Peter can't do it himself. If we know bookstores, if we know friends, if we teach classes, mixed frequencies needs a bit of a shove at this point, and certainly deserves one. So thanks for indulging me on this antique contrivance.
Well, no, it's a contemporary phone, a contemporary Zoom. The antique, I think, is U and B. But all right. Anyway, it was a great occasion. Thank you so much, all of you. We missed a few. Luis Urrea wanted to come, but he's in Honolulu and being beset by worshipers, I think, and it's difficult to get out of that. I thought that would please you. Jenny Dorn was otherwise tied up, so I'm sorry about that, but we had a great time. And in fact, the Matthias on the phone through the iPad and the ether worked out. Anyway, I agree with John. More people should get in touch with this book. It's quite marvelous, and I hope those of you out there in Radio Land would be moved to take a look at it. Anyway, thank you, Mark.
Michael, I'll give you a call tomorrow.
Okay.
Yeah, bye.
All right. Thank you, Mark. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Michael. That was wonderful, and a wonderful dedication to Peter Michelson, whose work should absolutely not be ignored. Please do go to the Mad Hat Press website, and you can find Peter's book, Mixed Frequencies, there. And we'll be happy to send you one or two or three. I'm so delighted for this show today. And I'm just going to tell you also, next Saturday we have a lineup of Bruce Bond, Sharon Mesmer, Virginia Conchin, and Walt Hunter. So please do join us for that. In the meantime, I'm going to hand the mic over to Cassandra for the open mic.
We've got some great ones today. We've got amazing Susan, who's going to kick off. I hope it might be with an elegiac poem, but I'm not sure. I don't want to force her into anything. So let's hear Susan. Are you there?
Mute. I wasn't sure you were going to call on me first here. How come that's not?
Sorry, I had you on my list first.
Okay. I'm going to have to go into my email. So. Yeah, thanks, Cassandra, for letting me read on the bike as always. It's such a privilege to be around some really great poets. This is my first book. And well, I've written poetry before, and I'm not sure if I'll publish or not yet, but I certainly enjoy writing. Cape Ann. We stopped by Thomas Stern's fine childhood summer home. That day, time's distance granted us the pleasure to laugh at the pomposity of the old fascist church warden. The T.S. Eliot Society of America is established in that venerable shingle-style house, now nearly restored for new poets' residencies and residences. It was a week after another southern hurricane. Big breezy winds blew north. As we drove on further, we watched surf waves crashing, sweeping sand onto a big rocky beach. And louder, louder, and louder was the young seagull's palaver above the shore between Gloucester and Rockport.
Wow. So big breezy winds blew north is beautiful.
Oh, thank you, Cassandra. Thank
And
you.
I love the fact, you know, one of the things I love about your poetry in this space is the attention to houses and places. So you had the beautiful one last time you read about the hotel, and then this time, you know, you've got, you know, emphasis on house, T.S. Eliot's house as well. So yeah, I love that. It brings in your architecture expertise as well.
Well, yeah, it does. It sure does. I think that way. That's how I think.
I like how you think. Awesome. Mike, we've got Mike Folds is here, everyone, in his space age garage, I think, or some space age background that we've always commented on. And he read a beautiful poem last time he was here, and he is going to read from his new book. It's got a great title too, Mike, your book. We'll have to unmute.
This is a chapbook from Shrivena Barva Press, and Jonathan Penton was the editor on the book.
It's beautiful. I love the cover.
And the cover is Christopher Pansner, who's an American artist living in Paris.
Wow.
He's done a number of movies. He's working on. Well, we've done a couple of series of ekphrastic and reverse ekphrastic poems that I think you've seen a few of them, Cassandra.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So anyway, this is a short chapbook. The poem is called On Dreams, and it's called and it's subtitled No Reservations Needed. What are dreams but reflections of ourselves? The last music you hear echoes through the night, stays until erased by what you hear in the morning. That essential element, bivouacked in soft tissue called the brain, protected in its shell of bone, has the rest of you to thank, like a humble performer sharing the stage with other members of the orchestra. It's no accident we are here, struggling together, striving to make our separate ways through this brittle biosphere. Why now remember Persephone? Was she once my lover? Why now explore changes bodies go through to metamorphose from infant to geriatric? Why now furtive glances into this future of the past, this crystal common to us all, the heart, the brains, lungs, liver? Why make one more important than another when it's the skin that holds it all together? That soft shell, angels and gods peel away to harvest our stored realities, our shared experience. The vanished, leaving art, artistry, a few drawn characters behind, curious remnants occasionally surfacing like bones of uncles from the muck of riverbanks, adding dimension to the puzzle. We travelers hit upon a cornucopia that illuminates the darkness when we are without a sun, that feeds us round the clock. No reservations needed, but blessed to have had one. What are dreams but reflections of ourselves? The last music you heard echoing until buried in the midden of days. Thank you.
Thank you so much there. The last music you hear echoes through the night, bivouacked in the soft tissue called the brain. But my favorite line might be, why not Persephone? I think more of us should ask ourselves, why not Persephone?
Why
So
not?
thank you so much. That was
Sure.
awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Don Wombat Wessick. He's always got something great. What do you got for us this week? What's
Oh, this is the opening of a short story called "The Cashier Always Rings Twice," and it's dedicated to anybody who may have been late on Monday night. I was sitting in my basement office at 4th and Drucker with nothing to keep me company but a bottle of rye whiskey and a bad attitude. Business was slow. It was already the 10th of the month, and Mom was bugging me about the rent. Then an American black bear walked in. She had a broad skull and narrow muzzle covered with dense underfur and long, coarse guard hairs. Is this the Pill Bottle Detective Agency? That's right. I tilted back my fedora to get a better look at her. Morris Pill Bottle, owner and general manager, at your service. Being the only employee, that pretty much made me both, but knowledge is power, so I didn't tell her that. Morris, huh? I thought detectives were supposed to have manly names like Dick, Rod, or Johnson. If you want to discuss Freud's theories, I said, you'd be seeing Dr. Feigenbaum at Drucker and 4th, or taking Intro to Psych at the Antelope Valley Community College. What gives? My name is Ursula Fogbottom. I think somebody followed me here. Tall guy in khaki pants and a pale blue shirt? Yeah, Ursula sat on her haunches. That's David Attenborough. He won't bother you. I poured a shot of whiskey into a clean glass and slid it over to her. I don't get many bears in here. At these prices, no wonder. Ursula wrapped her meaty paws around the glass but couldn't get the hang of lifting it. I'll ask you again, what gives? I'm hosting a banquet and need somebody to pick up some tofu, broccoli, and oyster sauce at the grocery store. She tapped her short, rounded claws on my desk. I propose to pay you a tidy sum to do my shopping. Just how tidy we talking about? I asked. $5. That doesn't even fold my laundry. 10. Still leaves a lot of dirty dishes in the sink. 12. What about the lime stains in the shower? 20. You drive a hard bargain, Mr. Pillbottle. Ursula Fogbottom stood and extended her paw. Do we have a deal? I shook and watched her walk out the door. She had the full figure of someone who'd forged berries and raw salmon in preparation for a long winter snooze. Smart mammal, but she got one thing wrong. I drove a Hyundai. I buckled my snub-nosed 45 under my trench coat and went shopping. I grabbed a basket from inside the sliding doors. The dispenser of sanitizing cloths was empty, so I took my chance with the residue left over from employees desperate for a tilapia fillet or carton of chicken tenders on their way home from the daily grind of spreadsheets, corporate mission statements, and cold calling consumers to sell extended warranties for the napkin rings they bought sometime during the Clinton administration. The produce section was a collection of afterthoughts from America's meat-based diet, a cornucopia of dietary sermons ignored by children and adults alike. I found the broccoli between the Brussels sprouts and button mushrooms. Only 2 pieces remained. The florets were yellow as a Bedouin's urine, and the stalks as limp as an 80-year-old watching Barney the dinosaur while getting a root canal from Cinderella's stepsisters. Some guys might be into that, but I wasn't, especially at $8.99 a pound. The tofu was the ugly duckling in a flock of tempeh, hummus, vegan hot dogs, and impossible beef Wellington. I collected 2 packs along with a bottle of Lee Kum Kee oyster sauce from the Asian section. When I returned to produce for one last look, the broccoli was gone.
Thank you so much. Yes, John was a featured artist on a show that I was late for and missed him. So I appreciate the repeat performance. My favorite line is, I thought detectives were supposed to have manly names like Dick, Rod, or Johnson. There's so many funny ones in that. Thank you so much. I really appreciate
Thanks.
you reading. Badass Cindy is next. She's going to have something alliterative as my guess, but maybe my spidey senses are off. I'm not sure this week, but whatever she reads is always fantastic. So Cindy, the floor is yours.
I don't know if I should really read this. I did another alliterative poem. And because I chose the letter P, it kind of lent itself to a little bathroom humor, which Bob pointed out is not really his style. It's not mine either, but I'm going to do it. It's called PP Poem. Pennsylvania is a pleasant place, but Paris and Prague are prettier. Porno is passé, and so is my Picayune proofreading. Will I positively be punished if I put the word putz in this poem? How about plots? That's a Yiddish word. It means to just plot down on the floor. Otherwise, people, it will just plod along too plainly and peacefully. Phooey. This piece of posy is purposely puny and pocket-sized because I had to pee while planning and penning my playful parody on the porcelain bedpan in the pink parlor. Perhaps I'm a poet who prefers to piss on her own parade. I could have been pluckier and said, I'm poised to puke, but that would be particularly putrid. Let's proclaim that this epigram be perceived as a pipe, or maybe just a pip. Can you predict that this half-pint prose will be published? Will the pundits applaud? Will the powers that be pleased to pursue this puerile pablum? Pop, pop, pop. Oh, pooh. That's probably the point of all this pulp and puffery. Thank you.
Loved it. I always wait to see what alphabet you've got next. I would personally love a pink parlor, but that's another story.
I knew you would pick that out. I knew
Love
it.
Love it.
Thank
We've got our favorite last. It's Bob from his kitchen. He's going to give us something to take away for your evening or my day. And it's always, I don't know, the chicken was really hard to beat because chicken. But I feel like it could be an information or something else that you've got for me today. What do you got?
I'm back to information, a new information piece. Information. Stole fire from the blacksmith, and fire from the baker, and fire from the woman who tended the altar. Stole water from the machine that created the lake, and earth from the place where the priests were buried. Stole air from the lungs of the tired horse. Stole a tree that never grew old, and a snake that spoke only lies. Stole books from the well where they had been hidden, and a bowl from the Museum of Promises. Stole the caption that would have let this all make sense, and the number that gave it a place in time. Stole the only name by which it would be known.
Oh, Bob, you forgot that you stole our hearts too. We love you. That was an amazing way to end. Thank you so much. I always love having you last in the Lit Balm open mic. And I also have to shout out to Ted Dieterman, who I think I'm doing the cleaning in his house, or I may be painting. I'm not sure, but Ted's always welcome. He's taken us on drives on his Saturday. Here he is. Hey, Ted, I think he's painting. Yeah. Excellent. Mark, back to you.
So here's one last short poem of Peter Michelson. And of course, bear in mind that Peter wrote very few short poems. Chronicles of Ceylon. And remember that Peter lived in Ceylon, Sri Lanka for a while. Having seen the Bodhi tree in the ancient sacred city, seen the poison proceeding through the ancient royal city, aimed the great impatience with ubiquitous bhikkhus, having no pretension to supreme enlightenment, nor to transcendence. For the four astas, and having seen the lion feed and the tiger feed on the carrot, I recite these chronicles of Ceylon, now Sri, which is to say, resplendent Lanka, for the pleasure and cognizance of those deposed to Serendib, all this more 20 centuries after the sage entered into Nibbana and Krishna sang a yoga melody. So Peter was definitely very, very much connected with Buddhism, there's no doubt. We wish him well in the afterlife, of course. I thank you everyone so much for this wonderful evening. I'll work out my mic issue somehow in the next couple of days. But yeah, it's been wonderful to see you. Thank you, Michael, for organizing this tribute to Peter. And see you guys next Saturday, I hope, with all those wonderful guys that are appearing. Bruce Bond, Sharon Messmer, Virginia Conchin, and Walt Hunter. So don't forget that. Yeah? Lots of peace, love, and poetry. Bye, guys.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.